Bombeck was an American housewife who became well known as a writer and a humorist. And she wrote hundreds of articles that appeared in newspapers all across this country for probably over a 30-year period. I can often remember my mother mentioning Irma Bombeck, and she would say, well, like Irma Bombeck says. And there probably been a number of wives who have quoted from the pen of Irma Bombeck. She wrote a column on what she might do differently were she given the opportunity to live her life over again. And she's been dead probably over 15 years or so now. But she said, if I had to live life over again, she said, I would have waxed less and listened more. She said, I would have taken the time to listen to my grandfather ramble about his youth. I would have eaten less cottage cheese and more ice cream, and I like that one. She included some other points, but then she summarized by stating this. She said, given another shot at life, I would seize every minute of it. She said, I would look at it, really see it, try it on, live it, exhaust it, and never give that minute back until there was nothing left of it. Making the most of one's time is so very, very important, isn't it? Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers, said, do not squander time, for that's the stuff life is made of. And yet if we're not careful, we will waste a lot of time engaged in that which we might call frivolous, that really in no way benefits us. You can't kill time without injuring eternity, somebody has well spoken. And so I want us to think about this morning about the importance of time, especially as it relates to our families. I don't know anything that should be more precious to us while we're here on earth than our families. I know this about that great man Noah, that while he was building an ark, he was doing so with his family, wasn't he? And if every other family had been like Noah's, there would not have been a flood to have destroyed the world. Noah, so many other characters in the Old Testament and in the New were like him. They loved family. As a matter of fact, in Genesis 18:19, we learn about Abraham that God wanted him to bring forth this son Isaac, who in turn would, through his seed line, bring about the Christ. God says, I know him. I know what kind of man he is. I can entrust children to him. And I've often thought about that passage and thought about my own children. Would God say, I can entrust these children to Barry Grider and know all will be well? Something to think about. And how we spend our time is very, very important. As a matter of fact, while it's important to work, we can become so caught up in our work that we forget about prioritizing and using our time wisely. Preachers do this. Preachers can get so caught up in their church work that the family is forgotten. And I'll tell you this, those children, as they come of age, will never forget who came first. Some may disagree, but I will say this, if my responsibilities as your preacher ever gets to the point where I cannot be a good husband, father, then it's time for me to step aside as a preacher. Because I believe I have a priority in this life above everything else. And that is to be the right kind of husband and the right kind of father. And if we're going to be the right kind of husbands and wives and sons and daughters, then it's going to take setting aside some time for each other. And you look at well-balanced children are usually those who are the product of a home where time has been spent with them. Positive time. Where their lives have been impacted greatly because of loving parents who were concerned about the character of their children and wanted them to grow up healthy, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Don't ever say this about God, and I've heard some say this: God cares nothing about time. I understand in 2 Peter 3:8 that with the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day, but that just means God's not confined to time. Don't you recall in Galatians 4:4, in the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son? In the right time, God says it's time for Jesus to come into this world. God is concerned about time, and He gave time to benefit man. And yet somebody says, well, I just don't have enough hours in the day to get done. I hear my preacher friends talking this way, and number one, I know they're trying to impress everybody else around them that they're busier than all other preachers. That's the first thing I learned. And the second thing I learned is this: when they talk about their busy schedule, it means they cannot say no. Sometimes you've got to say no. And number three, it means this: they evidently do not know how to organize their time. 24 hours in a day, don't forget, that was given by God. And that tells me there is enough time in every day to work, to eat, to get some rest, to have some downtime to spend with family or to enjoy some good healthy recreation, and to do all of that graciously. I believe that. God gave us just what we need when it comes to time every day. All right? But we want to make the most of our time. We don't want to be frivolous with our time. We want to make the most of it, because the Bible also says this: redeeming the time because the days are evil. Ephesians 5:16. I don't know why we can't apply that to the home. Do you? I want to make the most of my time at home. I mentioned in the bulletin article this past week, a bulletin article that I titled Just Fishin'. I mentioned how that I was exercising this past week, and I was on a treadmill, and in front of me at the fitness center there are about 13 or so television sets. All right? And on those television sets, usually either a news program, and you know how depressing that is, or it's a sports program. Occasionally there may be something I'm watching on the sports channel that I like, but no offense to bowlers or poker players or folks like that. I don't watch any of that, okay? That doesn't interest me. And so I did notice right in front of me was the music video channel. And Trace Adkins was on that video singing a song. Now, you're familiar with Trace Adkins, and I have been impressed with him the last few years because Trace Adkins has done so much on behalf of our veterans, the Wounded Warrior Project. And so he seems to be a man who really loves our country, and he's got some good songs, maybe some not so good. But the song that was on that video is called Just Fishin'. And Trace is out with his little girl, and they're enjoying a good time fishing. And I like these words that are found in the chorus of the song, and I mentioned them in the bulletin. Here's what he says: she ain't even thinking about what's really going on right now, but I guarantee this memory's a big one, and she thinks we're just fishing. She thinks we're just fishing, but what's he doing? He's making some wonderful memories with his little girl. I'll tell you something. Our children right now may not realize what all's going on when we spend time with them, but they will remember one day. Memories are being made, and a good life is made up of positive memories. Now, it's not my obligation to give my children everything. Number one, I can't do that. And number two, that wouldn't be good for them, just to give them everything they desire. That's not good. But I do have this responsibility, and so does my wife. We have the responsibility of providing the very best home life possible, and to be making wonderful memories that will impact our children for a lifetime. We do have that responsibility. And by the way, things don't always provide that. But spending time together can help us with that. I want you to notice this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And I believe God gives a formula way back there in the Old Testament, the principles of which are still good for us to follow today. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Listen to what God says through His man Moses to the children of Israel. In verse 4 of Deuteronomy 6, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. This is a text about good parenting. And God says you want to be a good father, and the same would be true with a good mother, then you learn first and foremost to love God. Love God, verse 4. Love Him supremely, verse 5. Love Him with all your heart, soul, and strength. I cannot really love my children until I understand something about the concept of the love of God. Now, we love because He first loved us. And therefore, as I study God and His character, I learn about His love and that He loves as a father. Now think about this, Dad. Think about this for a moment. Our children grow in their understanding of God based on what they see in their earthly fathers. So it is that we talk about God being a father, and I'm an earthly father, and so I want my children to love God and see Him as their father. But how do they relate to me? Because you see, what they see in me very well could be what they see in the Father in heaven. If a child sees a father as a tyrant, then that's how they're going to view God. And so that's very sobering when we think about that. First thing is love your children. But you can't properly love your children until you understand something about the love of God. And once we understand that concept about how God loves, and that's the kind of father we want to be, then that's going to affect our words, for example. Did you notice that in verse 6? And these words which I command you? The words spoken to our children are very, very important. Some things said to a child can positively impact him. He will never forget it. She will never forget it. Some words can scar for life. I remember words spoken by my parents that were positive in nature, that affirmed who I was. But I can also remember some hurtful words. I really do. And I am sure my children will as well. But I hope there will be a whole lot more positive things they can remember than negative, don't you? I really do. Because Proverbs 15:28 warns us, the righteous studies to answer. That's a great passage. That means that you're going to think about what's said to your children. You're going to think about what you say to your mate. The righteous studies to answer. You ever heard that person say, I just say whatever's on my mind. That's what foolish people do, right? But it says, right-thinking people study how they're going to answer. I never will forget a number of years ago, and I think I've told some of you this story, but others probably have not heard it. I was in Denver, Colorado, speaking in a meeting, and a young man that I had not seen previously during the services came in, and he was seated near a woman that I came to the conclusion was his mother. He was very disrespectful of her, and it's the only time really that I've ever known a young person or anybody else to be very disrespectful in the service while I was speaking. As I was speaking that night, the young man even began to mock me as I was preaching. And my first reaction, I thought, well, I'll just call him down right now. But I didn't want to do that. That wasn't right. I didn't know him. I didn't know why he was behaving that way. So I just didn't pay any attention to him. But I thought, how can I respond to that young man? I mean, I noticed how he was behaving toward his mother. I noticed how he was behaving toward me. I noticed how he didn't care. And so when I saw him out in the lobby, I immediately went over to him. This is how I handled it. I took his hand. I shook his hand. I said, how you doing, buddy? Tell me about yourself. He was shocked. He was shocked that this preacher would be so nice to him, I guess. And all of a sudden, he loosened up just a little bit, and he began to tell me a little bit about himself. When his mother then came over, and she said, well, I guess you've met our problem child. Then I knew there's the problem. Bless her heart, I don't know. I don't know anything about the daddy. Where was he, you know? So I hate to be ultra critical of her. At least she was at church. She wanted him there. But I wondered how often he had heard that phrase, the problem child. Did he never receive any kind of positive reinforcement at all? Did he never get any kind of encouragement whatsoever? He was just always the problem kid. And therefore, in his mind, why should he be respectful of anybody else? His mother, the preacher, anybody. Some quality time could have helped that situation. He wouldn't have been that way had two parents been there for him through the years and given him what he needed. So we're going to be careful with how we speak. And that's going to take some time, studying how we answer, spending some quality time in conversation. But it also means that we're going to have some quality time teaching. Look at verse 7. You shall teach them diligently. Where? Everywhere. Teaching what? These precepts that God's given. He says, you parents, you teach them diligently. And everywhere, and all of the time. What are you doing? You're molding and shaping some good character. That's what you're doing. You're helping some young men and some young ladies to grow into adulthood, to live healthy lifestyles, to be well balanced in life, to learn how to not only relate to friends, but how to relate to the opposite gender so that they too can establish good homes one day. You are trying to help them understand the importance of hard work, how important it is to defend freedom, how important it is to accept responsibility. All of that is molded and crafted in a young person while he is at home. And so, child rearing, for example, is not for the immature. It's for those who are adults, who've learned to behave like adults, who likewise have an understanding of the love of God, and who likewise are committed to this teaching. Remember Proverbs 22:6? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. That is, you say, this is where I want my young person. This is the direction I want him to go. And so we're going to set forth some good habits here early, and he'll be consistent. The older he gets, he won't depart from that. He'll be committed to that as he gets older. All right? But what does that word there say? Not just teaching is involved, but training. I've used this example before. A good football coach, for example. He's not going to say to his boys, y'all just go in there and watch some film, and that's enough. We'll take the field in the fall. No. You're going to have to put on the pads. You're going to have to get out there on the field, and you're going to have to do some training. Not only that, during the off season, you've got to be lifting weights. You've got to be hitting them hard. It's an ongoing process all the time. It's not just about learning the skill. It's about developing the skill through training. So it is at home. We've got to develop our young people not just through teaching, but likewise through training. And that includes the Lord, because Psalm 127:1 says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. You're building on an unsure foundation otherwise if you're not willing to take His advice and His admonition and listen to His precepts. So what does God say to fathers, for example, and really to both parents in Ephesians 6:4? Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. And don't forget, young people, right before that, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. But then fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. In other words, don't be so harsh in that home that you exasperate your children. Now, sometimes what every young person needs, and I know I needed it, is some tough love, some loving discipline. That's all part of care and concern. But is it possible that we can do what Paul says in Ephesians 6:4, exasperate our children, wear them down, become so harsh that these young people don't really have any motivation whatsoever to respond in obedience as they should? One young man reached the age of 18, and he said to his military-style daddy, he said, "Dad, I would like an honorable discharge from your platoon, if that's all right." Okay? Well, I understand that maybe some principles learned from the military might have to be applied sometimes in the home. But our children don't need to grow up with a sergeant barking orders, do they? They need a whole lot more than that. And so, a number of years ago, I wrote about 10 essentials for parents to help us so that we won't be exasperating parents. And I developed this idea from Ephesians 6:4. How is it that we can cause our children to lose heart? First thing I said, when we don't give them time. When we don't give them time, they lose heart. They don't feel appreciated. And therefore that contributes to low self-esteem. I heard about a couple who went into a toy store, and these parents said to the young lady who was the clerk, said, "We're looking for some toys. We need a whole lot of toys. We need our children to be saturated with toys because we both work and we don't have time to spend with them. And so we need a lot of things to occupy their time." And so they'd look on this shift, "No, that's not good enough," or "We need more than that." And they never were satisfied till that young clerk who didn't even have children finally said this. She said, "I think what your children need are two parents, and we don't supply them." She knew more than they did, didn't she? Your children need two parents, and that's what every child needs, right? And by the way, when we speak of two parents, we're talking about a father and a mother. Not two fathers, not two mothers, right? There are some things that only a father can provide for a child. Some things only a mother can provide for a child. Nothing's like spending time, little boy spending time with his dad, throwing a baseball or throwing a football. Daddy does that. But what about if he falls down and he hurts his knee? Who's he want then? Only mama can take care of that. And so God made us different, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, but that's a good thing. And those differences can even benefit our children if we do it right. Well, when we don't give them enough time, that's one way to exasperate. Here's another. When we refuse to understand. You know, I'm living as an adult, I forget what it's like to be a child. Number 3, when we lay down the rules and refuse to explain. Now, there are times when it might be good to just go ahead and say, "Because I said so," right? That has its place. Because that establishes authority. I didn't like to hear that, but my parents had to let me know that they were the ultimate authority in my life at that time. So because I said so, that's good enough. But are there times when we give rules that we ought to explain why? Yes. Here's number 4, when we refuse to give them attention. Or number 5, when we act like the children and not the parents. I'll tell you, if ever there was a time when you have a lot of parents acting like children, now is the time. As a result of this, a lot of parents don't even rear their children anymore, because they themselves are like children. And they've turned that wonderful job God has given over to somebody else. And then number 6, when we don't provide the security of a stable home, that's when we can exasperate our children. What about when we never give them a break? When we say they never do anything right? It's always wrong. What about through improper discipline? There's a proper way to discipline. There's an improper way to discipline. What about when we expect them to be adults? They are not. Number of ways we can do this. And in the end, it harms the child. I think there are a lot of young people today who are crying out. And what they're saying is to parents, maybe to grandparents sometimes, spend some time with me. Spend some time with me. Give me some attention. Show me that you love me. Be the grown-up in the situation. Some may be just saying, let's go fishing. Let's spend some time together. And so, it's all right. It's all right in the home to have a good time. If ever there's a place you ought to have a good time, it ought to be in the home. Learn that it's all right to enjoy yourself at home. It's all right to have some fun. And if you can't have fun with your family, something's wrong. Learn to enjoy your family. Learn to laugh together. Even let those girls giggle sometime all night long. It's all right. Friday night, close the door. Let them giggle a while. Let them have fun. Because it was Thackeray, the great writer, who said, laughter is like a window in the home. It lets the sunshine in. And that's right. Our homes need a lot of sunshine today. They need a lot of laughter. Need some enjoyment. Need fun things to happen. And the reason I say that, because what may seem small to us may be really big to them. I mentioned this in the article. What may seem like small things to us, and here are just a few things I mentioned. Sitting down for a meal together, taking an evening walk, going to ball games and concerts, working a puzzle, having a devo together, wrestling on the floor, tea parties, trips together, hunting and fishing, and on and on. It can mean everything to a child. Charles Francis Adams, the great statesman, the son and grandson of presidents, was keeping a journal about all of his activities. One day he wrote, I went fishing with my son. Day wasted. But he didn't know his son was keeping a journal as well. When looking back at that journal years later, here's what the son wrote on that very same day. Went fishing with my dad. It was the greatest day of my life. And so I can remember a boy a number of years ago saying to his daddy, Daddy, please, please take me to an Alabama football game. All right, we'll go. Yay. Got closer to time. I knew I needed to get some tickets. Son, do you really want to go to that game? Yeah. But don't you know, if I go down there, we get in late on Saturday night, and I have to preach the next morning, and it just is, oh, Daddy, you said we'd go. Okay, son, we'll go. Now, I love to go see Alabama play football, but I get tired the older I get, When we go to that ball game, he's just a little fella. We take off early in the morning. I didn't have to get him up at all. He was up, ready to go. We got breakfast along the way. We walked around the campus once we arrived. He got all kinds of things, he could bring back home with him. I said, you want to hold it? No, I'm not going to hold it. But he did. And we went to that ball game, got something to eat later that night on the way back. And then the next thing I know, for the rest of the trip, he's zonked in the back seat, right? I said, that old boy back there asleep while I have to drive and get home late. I was able to carry that boy back then. And I got him out of the car, and I'm holding him to take him inside to go to bed, and whispered in my ear, and he just said, thank you, Daddy. Worth it? Why, every year since then, we've had one Saturday in the fall, at least one, where we do that. And by the way, he stays awake the whole time now, and I don't have to carry him inside. It's worth it. And he's never forgotten that first trip, and I don't think he'll ever forget those times together. I won't. Did you know that really God gave us family to just give us a little taste of heaven on earth? But I'll tell you, a lot of young people today aren't too sure about heaven if you're going to compare it to home on earth. But surely in this audience, we want to dedicate ourselves to having the very best homes. That means inviting the Lord into our homes, letting Him be part of our homes. And it means spending some time together. You see, it used to be that folks talk about quantity is not what's so important, it's the quality of time. But now psychologists tell us that quantity, the amount's just as important as the quality. Make it good and do it often. Spend time together. We're going to sing a song. Why keep Jesus waiting? And of course that speaks to us as individuals. Why keep Him waiting out in the cold? Let Him come in. And He can do that when you render obedience to the gospel message. But likewise, let's not keep Him out in the cold when it comes to our homes. Let Him in. And let Him in this morning by responding in obedience to Him, either as individuals or responding in obedience as we subject our wills to His in our very own homes. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation, won't you make it known now as together we stand and sing?